彩的表现。首先来看一下 FCB 战队他们的出战。
And we are back, guys. It's very good to know, though, that the team breakdown has actually been presented already, because for Battlegrounds in particular, every lobby will be having 4 teams available, 2 from the Chinese scene and 2 from the international scene. Of our international teams, who do you think has the leg up here, Hacker?
Today, I think it's Team Liquid. As I pointed out a little bit earlier when you asked me who my favorite team was going into this as well, the players they have brought, WTY, Bill, and Show, I think are pretty big powerhouses, at least from what I've seen in the Americas server, and I think they've been playing on all the other servers as well. So I'm looking forward to seeing what they have to bring.
That's right. And if we looked at briefly, we caught a glance there of the roster for FCB, which is a very newly formed team, I would say, in the esports scene at least. Zim there being signed and also brought on with Swizz and Blizes, who are very, very powerhouse players in Constructed, but we don't necessarily see them play in Battlegrounds. For a bunch of the other teams, they have specific players, like you said, Show and WTY built for Battlegrounds, and then they have a different roster for Constructed. Do you think that if you're having to grapple with 2 different game modes, that's going to be a disadvantage?
I think with how much practice these teams have been putting into Constructed, I think that's going to be a little bit easier for them to get into, even though it is a new format. I'm curious to see how well-versed they are in Battlegrounds. I'm sure they've been playing some games, obviously, to prep for this, but I'm curious how much experience they've had compared to some of the other teams who have brought their players specifically from the Battleground scene.
That's true. And the very first round will be with Liquid and FCB versus VK and LP, 2 teams from China. And of course, I think everybody is now familiar with VK ever since Lion put them on the map with her win at the Global Championship last year. But for Battlegrounds in particular, their lineup is, I have to say, players that I'm not necessarily familiar with. But if we look at the MMR, I think it's very impressive across the board here.
Yeah, we got a snippet of seeing what the MMR of all these Chinese players are, and I've got to say, my peak is nowhere near any of these. Even the lowest ones on the list they've sent us are just incredible. All of them are consistently 13, 14K MMR, which is incredible to say the least. On any server that we can see on Americas, Europe, or the Asia server, that will easily get you into top 50, if not even top 20, from what we can see. That's incredible that all these players have such high rankings.
Yeah, over in VK, the 2 players that they have for Battlegrounds are Diana and Kimmy. And VK Diana is actually a player that's been very active and constructive as well. We've seen him participate in Masters recently and have a pretty good performance. If you manage to get on stream in the later part of the day, it just means you have a positive win rate at the very least. VK Diana rocking that 13.5k MMR and Kimmy with the 14,000. Both of those, as you said, if you get to that rank, that's already pretty much in the upper echelons of any other region. And if we look over at LP, this is a team that features Trunks and PF. And Trunks is a player that I've heard of from many years prior, not necessarily in Constructed, but it seems that a lot of the players have been making the move to Battlegrounds recently. Do you have any opinion on how Battlegrounds and Constructed have been taking up your own time as a pro player in Constructed?
Battlegrounds is probably a bit of a trap if you're trying to compete in Masters and stuff, because it doesn't quite help you prepare for anything. I think it's good to, and the way I've been using it is to kind of de-stress and relax, take a break from Constructed and Standard, because it still is a very challenging game mode. And even though it's easy to pick up, there is a lot to learn and master, and there's a lot of finesse and intricacies you can learn only by playing over and over and over again. I think it's still going to be pretty cool to see as a competitive mode, as opposed to how I've been playing it recreationally. And I'm sure these players have been taking a much more serious tone to it, in contrast to maybe streaming it for a casual audience.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of streaming, though, I think recently the numbers have been showing Battlegrounds has been pulling in a great audience no matter where you are in the world. And some of the top streamers over in the Chinese scene include Nightwalk, that we mentioned a while ago. I'm really, really looking forward to seeing how he does, because it seems even if you ask the players in the international scene who they're looking out for, I've heard Nightwalk's name be thrown around here and there. over in the international teams, we will not be featuring everybody today because it is Group A, particularly for today, and tomorrow we'll be heading into Group B, and 2 lobbies today will be featuring the same teams that you'll see in the first round. And so I think that it also plays a little bit into your mindset if you don't have to play every single day. Do you prefer, like, as a pro player, like if a tournament has all of your work done in the first half and then you have to come back for the finals, or would you rather play a little bit every single day?
I think personally, I prefer a bit more of a break, but I find that I get fatigued after too long. After competing for too long, my brain just gets tired, and maybe that's something I need to work on. But I'm sure some of these players would enjoy a little bit of a break in between, and this way they also get to scope out who they might be facing if they make it to the finals, because on their off day they can watch the other 4 teams in Group B and seeing how they're performing, what kind of strategies they're using, and getting reads on what they might be doing in the finals if they get there.
Very true. And speaking of reads, I think that there's also a lot of experience that comes into play here, because prior to this tournament, there was a tournament called GTC, or the Gold Team Championship, where Team Liquid was already a participant, but they were the only one outside of the Chinese region to feature, foreign players. And because they have that experience with playing in a very different setting, I would say more media coverage than you might see from the general Grandmaster scene, that might give them a leg up. And I think across the casters board, we also predicted them to do the best. But I'm particularly looking at T1 to kind of prove me wrong as well, because they have Sixo in their roster, who is perhaps one of the best Battlegrounds players outside of China.
Yeah, Sixo has been taking a bit of a break from competitive Hearthstone from quite a long time ago, but I've seen him kind of resurface and make some posts on Twitter about how he's grinding up Battlegrounds now, and I think he's been sporting some pretty high rankings as well across some of the servers. I think I saw him talking about being 14K, which is, like you said, in the upper echelon. It's very, very high up there, easily the top 0. whatever percentage. So I'm curious to see, and I haven't been able to catch any of his streams, so I'm curious to see how he's going to impress us this tournament.
Yeah, I myself haven't caught his streams very often too, but I do see him lurking, or not really lurking, but around in Twitch chat of a bunch of other top Battleground streamers. And I think for the BG community, it has been growing very, very actively for the past few months now. And the top players are still very welcoming to learning new things from different people. And I think the fact that we are combining now the Chinese scene, which is rather insular, with the global scene, I wonder if we'll start to pick up on new techniques. Is there a better way to do your transitions? Can we learn something by watching Night? I wonder if they'll be able to adapt on the fly as the week goes along, because yet another unique thing about GCWC is that we are having an entire week of competition, whereas the Masters Tours, they go on 3 days max.
Yeah, specifically about Nightwalk, I've heard that we should keep an eye out on his Murloc transitions. For players in Battlegrounds who know about what a Murloc transition is, it requires a full turn or two to set up and gather some cards, and then completely change your entire board to a board of Murlocs where you try to adapt them and make them super strong. And it's kind of difficult to do when you're streaming normally or playing casually, but we'll see if they can pull it off under a stressful environment.
Yeah, and it looks like we're about ready to get into our first game. So without further ado, let's hop. That we're very used to seeing heroes. What do you think of the first selections?
I actually just missed some of them, but I think I saw someone pick Patchwork, which isn't picked up that frequently. It used to be very popular before his hero power got changed. I believe it used to give an extra 5 or 10 health, but since the nerf, we haven't really seen too much of it. People have been favoring sort of tempo-oriented heroes where you can use your hero power to buff the board early on, which will help you get to the mid to late game a lot more consistently.
And if we're talking about tempo-oriented, the Kael'thas pick there for Bill was definitely one of the best heroes to get for the early to mid game, but also his teammate Show arguably the most powerful hero right now after the nerf to Captain Hooktusk, it already looks like Liquid has the great pick of the early heroes, but of course, that's just the first piece of the puzzle. Beast is the banned tribe for this lobby, so we're not going to be seeing, say, early Rat Pack runaways with Kael'thas, which is, I think, one of the best things you can do when beasts are available.
Interesting. Patrick did not have a minion on turn 1. I wonder if they've been rolling to try to find a very specific start, maybe looking for a Wrathweaver to get a very aggressive big demon start.
Yeah, and that is, I guess, a strategy you can go for with Patchwork with that additional health. But we do see the Patchwork, who was played by Zim, I believe, decided to level there. But we are just going to stick with LPPF here, and I'm very glad because this is a player that we're not all too familiar with. Never mind, it is Zim who has picked up a Swabby on the 4 gold turn. So it looked like his turn was pick up Swabby into level Swabby.
Oh,
That's
so he held the minion. Right. That makes a lot more sense than rolling. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
The Yogg turn was SPPF on Yogg. What you see sometimes people doing on turn 2 when they have 4 gold and there's a token available in the shop, they can buy the token generator. In this case, it was a Murloc Tidehunter. Sell the token and then hero power to make their board stronger a turn earlier instead of leveling on turn 2 and then hero power buying on turn 3.
We will move over to Kimmy, who is on the Millhouse, one of the heroes that plays most differently in terms of economy, but this looks to be a simple 3-buy turn if he wants it, or he could just hold on to that Micro Machine there. Yeah, nothing great in terms of this. That's always feel a ghoul that early, but for Millhouse, it's all about running away with the early start so you can power level later on and hopefully get into Dragons. But it's Diana who's on the Dragons right now. On Pyramid, it's not the most intuitive build to go for, but that 211 might lose its value pretty soon.
Yeah, getting a lot of health on the early minions is very powerful because you end up winning a lot of the early rounds. And as we can see, Pyramid's health was at 40. However, the Dragons can't really scale too much within themselves until you get maybe some Battlecry buffs later for it, whereas people normally pick up something like Murlocs or Wrathweavers where you can buff those and then they also scale after the fact of having their early health. But the Dragons, as you mentioned, might have only 2 attack for a very long time until they get a chance to upgrade their board.
Sho gets his first dig, and it's Salty Looter that is absolutely huge. One of the best scaling minions. I'd put it up there with getting, you know, crowd favorite very early on. And doesn't quite get the gold grubber to go along with it, but I think you're perfectly happy with that if you're Sho. As Eudora, you tend to take anywhere within the realm of 8 to 12 damage in the first few turns, assuming you dig leading up to that 6 gold turn. And I think the debate has been settled that you do dig on the 3 gold turn. And don't delay it any longer. Yeah,
definitely. It gets you online a lot faster. Your board is a little bit weaker because you don't have that first minion, but some stats have recently come out that show that digging on 1 tends to correlate to a higher win percentage.
And that's really quick because I think just a few weeks ago, Sho was saying that people who dig on 1 should be sent to Siberia or something, but Sixo was one of the earliest proponents for saying dig on 1 is always correct, and it seems that that has become the gospel truth now. We move on to PF, who of course, as Yogg, maintains a pretty healthy life total. Yogg is all about making sure that the early stats and cheap minions you get in the early game can lead you into a smooth level into around the 5-star point, where the hero power then becomes not so useful.
We see Zim not really going in a particular direction just yet, but he picks up a Salty Looter this turn. He was kind of mishy-mashy in terms of what minions he's been offered, but it looks like he might be starting to lean towards Pirates with the Salty Looter pickup.
Yep. For Blythe, though, sticking to the Murlocs, which is something you can do on Brand, stay on 2 for a while, try to get those triples, and it's looking like he will want to level up to 3, though, to start getting the Felfin Navigator and the Cold Light Seer to buff the entire board.
Yeah, recently Bran has been reworked and brought back into the Tavern, where his hero power for 1 mana refreshes the Tavern and offers only Battlecry minions. And when you're Murlocs, there are 2 very important Murlocs on 3, like you said, the Navigator and the Seer, which allow you to scale your board before having to level up to 4 and 5, where you'll, as Murlocs, you'll be wanting to find Bran, King Bagurgle, and some Primalfin Lookouts to further progress your board. So it gives you a good chance to bridge to that late game gap, bridge the gap to late game with the Murlocs.
Pretty cool to see the teammates side by side featured here. Kimmy with his somewhat mishmash build here is going to take minimal damage from the Bran. I think it's not a big deal. But it's funny to see that it's the Pyramid that has the Dragon build, whereas Millhouse doesn't have that. And Millhouse, you keep saying, is one of the best builds to go for that is Dragons, because once you build up to the Kalagos turn, it's much cheaper to buy all of those battle cries and buff the entire board, whereas Refreshing has, of course, less value with Millhouse.
Yeah. One thing to note that in this tournament, team members are not allowed to communicate with each other. They're only allowed to send emotes if they really want to. So it's interesting to see if they are going to change up their positioning against teammates and try to do less damage if they do have a friendly match-off like we had just seen there.
And we are going to head into Bill versus Blyzes for this next round. And already Blyzes' board looks a bit more resilient, having hit 2 golden minions. Spawn of Nazal, it's always a great early minion to have. But the Cannon is also the other premier, neutrally good, no matter what comp you have, minion to have on the 2-star Tavern. And paired with the leftmost minion gets the 2 shots immediately.
Yeah, the Scallywag has come out right around when the Cannon did, when the Pirate patch came out, and it's a very, very good combo. It does a lot of damage early, especially when there aren't as many stats on the board. Getting a guaranteed, what is that, 7 damage early from one attack, and from one hit, ends up being really powerful. And
Show hasn't taken any damage since he got that golden salty looter, and I have to say I'm not too surprised about it. I think his priority will be Aegizing until he can get to Hogger and maybe transition, well, not transition, but just go all in into the APM build, one of my favorites in Battlegrounds.
Yeah, I've lost a lot of MMR trying to make APM Pirates work. It's just so fun and incredible to watch. I really hope if he gets to that point, we get to see him highlight the APM abilities that he might have.
We are sticking on Show for now. Leveling is looking pretty juicy to me here. On the 9 gold turn, I think his dig is
3 out of 4 perhaps?
1 away from completion, right?
Yep, I think so.
So as long as he's able to make some room, it's also interesting if you want to level immediately. I think because there's a possibility of getting that immediate high roll of the golden hogger, you definitely want to be on 5 stars when you get the second dig online. So I fully expect Show to level this turn and next.
I wonder if he's considering getting the golden only on Tavern Tier 4 so that he may get the chance to get Hoggar and start the Pirates rolling. Normally you want to level to 5, Tavern Tier 5, and that way you get a Tavern Tier 6 minion. But with the setup that Show currently has, maybe he's thinking that it's better to go for the Tavern Tier 4 golden or lower, and then the Tavern Tier 5 reward.
Yeah, the Discover could give him that. But wow, he can also just hit the triple Dex Wobby right now. Discover the Hogger right now. Yeah.
Oh, he's holding, or is he holding it?
He's facing Kael'thas, a teammate, so he's holding, I believe.
Oh, we're seeing 2 different matches here, I see. Okay.
Yeah. It is a little bit disorienting, but you know what? I love it, Hacker. There is so much action going on here. 8 different players in Battlegrounds, if anyone isn't familiar. As long as you make top 4, it's generally considered a win. But of course, the higher you place, the more points. And the team with the most points after 6 lobbies are played, advancing into the top 4 played out on the last 2 days of this week.
It looks like Zim also has some a bit of a pirate setup. Not quite as powerful as Show's. Obviously, Show with a salty looter. The golden salty looter is going to be able to scale quite a bit more. So Show does level to Tavern Tier 5 before the dig. It looks like he's looking for a Tavern Tier 6 minion here.
Yeah.
With 2 goldens as well. Oh my god.
Liza would be premier here. Not quite what he's looking for. Probably just end up taking the Imp Mama as a tempo option here. For PF, they also see him discovering by a triple. This is on the 5 gold though. Only has 1 Murloc to work with, but the Primal Fin at least is a good economic choice. It lets him sell back 2 minions.
Definitely. We see Show picking up a Kalagos and an Amalgadon. So with the Dragon pickup, the Amalgadon gets 1 extra adapt.
Alright, he actually did go for Kalagos. You know, it's a fair thing. If you get Kalagos early enough, even if the rest of your board is pirates, you can think about partially transitioning into dragons. But I think the looter is big enough that it's not very well incentivized for Show. He's just trying to get a very good roll on the Amalgadon. Hits Divine Shield, but not poison.
That Divine Shield Wind Fury can be pretty powerful. Yeah, like you said, Divine Shield can't be added as easily. I guess in Amalgadon it's fine because you can still get the Annoy module. Yeah. But like you said, a Toxfin will round that out quite nicely. We see Zim hitting a triple here as well. Just freezing it for next turn.
Yep. He has a very pair gaming board of Pyre, and he looks like very similar to what Sho is doing, but perhaps a little bit slower overall because he hasn't had that much time to level due to the slow start. It does look like he would end up taking a loss against this board. That replicating Menace would be very annoying for him. Sorry, the Security Rover.
Yeah. Eudora just being able to level ahead and get these powerful units seems to just be overwhelming Zim, I believe, on Patchwork. Yes.
The Amalgadon sticking does end up spelling doom for Zim there. While the players are not allowed to communicate directly, they can use emotes. So I wonder if that's an opportunity to kind of set up any communications with their teammates. We'll find out a bit later though. But Blythe for now has hit the brand. He has Murlocs, so now it's all about looking for those Begurgles, those Primal Fins. But he still is on Tavern 4.
I think I'm curious if he stayed on 2 and 3 a little bit too long. Generally, the way I've been playing it and how I've seen some of the other streamers been playing is staying on maybe Tavern Tier 3, picking up some pairs, and once you get some triples available, you Tavern up to 4, turn in those triples, get the reward for 5, and then level to 5 right after when you have that that power spike from the upgrades. But it looks like he has not been leveling Tavern tiering up that often.
And he did end up just taking a tempo option there with the Bronze Warden buff combo. And it looks like with a powerful board like this from Sho, that could just be Blythe taken out at 7th place next to Zim if he's not careful, because he's at just 6 health now at this point. For Bill, though, this looks like a Murloc board that has a lot more potential for success. He himself is not on Tavern 5 just yet, but he's developed strong minions alongside some of those Murlocs.
Finds a Deflectobot. Seems to be selling off his Murlocs and going for more of the mech route.
Yeah, it looks like this is a type of board for Bill that could very well still go Menagerie even. If he picks up a Lifetime, he's got a Demon, Dragon, Murloc, and mech. But it all kind of depends on what Bob decides to give you once specific turn 5 rolls around. That's usually the decision point where you have to commit to a comp, because that's where most of the carry cards can be found.
Yep, a lot of the game-defining minions you won't be finding until the higher Tavern tiers. Looks like X-Flies was taken out by Sho. It's not a great start for FCB.
Both of our FCB players just picking up a total of 3 points after that. Double gold grubbers is something I usually love to see, but Bill is not the Eudora here. He doesn't have any way to capitalize.
I mean, he's thinking about it. He has 34 health, but I think he deemed it a little too expensive to pick up on the off chance that there's a triple.
Right.
Yeah, we seem completely in the mech mindset now. Bolvar?
Does look very much like he is transitioning a little bit more into mech. So yeah, Bolvar is a great option to pair with the Deflectobot and the 3/6 Dragon, which gets buffed every time a Divine Shield is procced. It's just a bit unfortunate that he couldn't time the Kael'thas hero power ideally to get the buff onto Bolvar, but as long as he stays with good tempo, I think it's a pretty good strategy for this lobby, which has been playing a bit more mech-oriented, which I would say is a conservative build. It kind of allows you to steadily get to top 4, but is usually not a winning comp.
Yeah, it's hard to scale mechs after a certain point. You have some cards like Iron Sensei, and the Dragon Enforcer scales a little bit within the match, but it has trouble keeping up with Menagerie builds and Murlocs once Battlecries start coming on over and over, turn after turn. Eventually, the opposing minion types can get so many stats that the mechs can't actually do enough damage to keep up. But like you said, it scales faster until they get those more important Tavern Tier 5 and Tavern Tier 6 minions.
Well, we are now going into the LP team, one of the 2 Chinese teams featured for this lobby, both of them with pretty powerful builds, I would say. The Divine Shield comp is also something PF has been going for right now, but Trunks in particular is facing off against a Dragon build that has Razorgore online and Nadina. Luckily though, buffs the Nadina, kills off the Nadina relatively late, so I think he has a good chance to still take this lobby, this particular match. And so it takes a very convincing win against the Pyramid. One of the first losses for Pyramid, probably the first major one now that it took away half of his health. For PF here, probably looking to triple this Boulevard or the Murlocs here.
Okay.
And now he has a decision point. If he levels here, he can pick up a carry for the rest of the game though. Looking on 6 stars though, it doesn't look like a board that you necessarily want Kangor for. I feel like Baron would be a bit more enticing here.
Yeah, I think I would agree, especially with the Selfless Hero already picked up. When you're playing mechs, there's not as many powerful units on Tavern Tier 6 that you really want. Like you said, Kangor's Apprentice is an option, but with only 2 eggs, it doesn't seem as powerful of an option compared to some of the other stuff you might be looking for, like you said, Baron, which is why generally on mechs you stay on Tavern Tier 4, unless you're looking for some very specific tech cards, like perhaps a Zap if you want to snipe an opponent's Baron Rivendare.
Did end up taking a brand there, so now he'll be looking to find as many Metal Tooth Leapers as possible, and also Strong Shell Scavengers later on, because he did have 2 taunt minions available. Speaking of another mech build though, Trunks himself has set up that very good mid-game Divine Shield build though, but it's pretty funny how many people have hit Deflecto bots here, which is not one of the most high-demand minions, I would say, when mechs are generally not the first place comp, but it might be that the Chinese players have decided that the strategy here in this team tournament is not necessarily to go for feast or famine and get the win often, but just consistently place in the top 4, and I think Mex have put himself in a good place to do that. For Bill over here on the right side though, his dragons have been faltering a little bit. It tends to happen that the Boulevards in the mid game can catch you off guard. If you have invested just into 1 or 2 big minions, sometimes the Divine Shields can mess with that very easily.
Still looks like he's able to get there with the Deflectobot reset.
Yeah, I didn't quite notice how many microbots were in there, but that completely farms the Yogg's board. And Bill, despite being at a pretty low health total, I think has a good shot of still making it in top 4. But Show here, leading the pack, of course, ever since that Salty Looter came into play, has still not found...
he just sold it off.
Yeah, he didn't find Hogger, but he did find Dragons, so he's committing into the Caligos build now.
Without more Hoggers, it is a little difficult to scale in terms of an economic standpoint. So I believe switching to Dragons means that any battle cry just buffing the entire board makes a bit more sense than trying to keep the Salty Loot around.
That's right. The last time we checked in on Show, he was still at that crossroads where the Caligos was his only dragon. I didn't think he would pick it in the first place, but Show realized that Caligos is one of those tier 6 minions that actually gives you a chance to finish top 1 or top 2. Depending on whether there are Murlocs at the end game. And despite it not being congruent with the board he currently have, he realized that he was so far ahead that he had the time to transition into Dragons, and it's paying huge dividends for him right now. The board has many battle cries that he can use here, looking at the Argus to further buff his 2 already taunted minions, or possibly put taunt on the Divine Shield as well.
Yeah. One thing you can also do in-game within the lobby, you can mouse over the opponent portraits where you can see their hero, and it can tell you what kind of setup they have, if they have mechs or Murlocs. And I believe if Show takes a look at what else is in the game, there's a couple of mech builds available, and he probably believes that having more stats across everything will help him more against these mech builds.
And Show with the big stats is hoping he can get there against the Divine Shield. That golden dragon is looking a bit problematic, but it managed to get sniped pretty early on in the combat, so now Diana has to rely on some Divine Shields to get there, but I think the dragons easily get there. And we could be looking at the end of the Deathwing here, because Amalgadon is very likely to stick at the end of this. The amount of damage though dealt by that particular trade, I think, has saved the Deathwing from immediate death.
Definitely. Close fight for Show, but still coming out on top. And the thing is, he's only going to gain more and more health as he bounces more battle cries. And like we mentioned a bit earlier, it'll be hard for Deathwing to scale more with the mechs he has available.
Second Amalgadon is available for sure if he wants it. Doesn't look like there's quite too much space, but at the very least it is a battle cry, so he could have that option of holding onto it for a triple later on if he wants. And I wouldn't normally recommend tripling Amalgadons, but he hasn't hit the poisonous on the first one.
Yep. It can serve as a more expensive toxin if you really need to. And getting some extra adapts doesn't hurt either. If there's some mechs left in the lobby, getting some plants can help.
And for WTY Bill, I think he's put himself in a decent position to get into top 4, but not quite win here. He is facing off against teammate Sho, so I guess Sho is holding on to all of these resources to make his board the least threatening possible, but it doesn't feel like he can quite get there to not knock his teammate out here. An unfortunate side effect of how Battlegrounds works sometimes in the team formats.
Yeah, definitely. We are down to our top 4 for the first lobby. We see Trunks in 4th place right now with 3 health, Diana with 7 health, WTY Bill with 13, and Sho quite in the lead with 23 health. He probably has 1 or 2 losses left in him if he happens to manage to lose a fight, but I believe he's in quite a leading position.
And Trunks there did pass up the triple on the Deflectobot, which is something that you would often recommend to do because having the 2 Divine Shield resets is often a lot more attack power actually gained, as long as both of the Deflectobots have a decent amount of attack to begin with, but they're not quite going to get there against the size of these dragons from the Pyramid. The 50+ health Razor Gore particularly is farming this board, even if Nadina doesn't immediately die.
I believe that's Diana's board, and now that I'm looking at it and comparing it to Sho's, I think Diana might have bigger dragons. And I think Diana also has a Nadina as well, Nadina the Red.
Right.
Which means that even in the Dragon Mirror, if you happen to get Divine Shields on your big dragons, they will trade a lot more favorably.
Yes, I think Nadine, and well, of course, even if Sho does get his own Nadina, the fact that the dragons each can get probably 2 value trades off of Sho's before they die is going to make things very difficult for Sho. He'll probably have to rely on the Amalgadons that he picked up to carry.
Yeah. The major factor here is Diana having 2 Caligoses, meaning that every battle cry will give +2/+2 to every dragon, whereas I believe Sho only had 1 Caligos.
Yeah. So right now we are looking at Diana off against WTY Bill, whereas Sho gets the Ghost for now. I don't think I see a way out of this, even though he has the Divine Shield on some pretty high attack minions. The stats just aren't there to beat 40+ health on a bunch of these dragons.
I wouldn't be surprised if this was a 100% guaranteed win for Diana in this round. We'll see if Sho... Yeah, go ahead.
He has to think about how he can actually beat this. I know that the teammates can't necessarily communicate, but I think Sho has to know by this point, having faced Diana prior, that the dragons are out of range for how he can naturally scale. So he has to pick up tools to transition, if not fully, but partially into Murlocs. And you can see him going for that right here. He has Megasaurs, he has the Amalgams, he has Gurgle.
He got a golden Murzond.
Yeah. It's huge.
This is incredible. So this is a very big buff to his board, but it still looks like the dragons might not be big enough. I think he was hoping to find a Nadina the Red, or maybe even a second Caligos to try and catch up in scaling, but it looks like he might be still a little short. Fortunately, he's against the Ghost this round.
Could still have 1 more turn to pick up a partial or full transition. That's going to be a sacrifice from the teammate WTY Bill to give Sho a little bit more time, because it looks like Diana's dragons cannot be stopped at the moment. So the most that Bill could probably do here, if all the stars align, is put Divine Shield Poison on maybe 2 additional Murlocs on the board, because he has the Bagurgle and the Amalgam. So if he picks up a second Megasaur and Murlocs in the opening board, that's probably the dream.
Right.
But even so, will that be enough?
It's hard to tell. He does have a few big dragons himself, but it just doesn't quite line up. The Caligoses on Diana's board seem to be small enough to where they might get value traded, but I'm not even sure if that's the case after this turn.
Sho does look like he has 4 dragons that look a decent amount of attack on them, but the 1620 and the 814 look like they're not going to help at all there. There's a second Megasaur, so Sho now has a decision point if he thinks that just buffing this board consistently can stack up. He won't know exactly how big Diana's dragons are, but he does pass up the Megasaur. Just gonna try and get this first one to give poison to the Amalgam.
I'm not even sure if he knows about the Nadina the Red. I'm not sure if that was around the last time he faced Diana.
Yeah, quite possibly. And so he's probably fishing for a Nadina of his own. There's a little bit of gold left. One more roll available if he
does
wants
get the poisonous on the Amalgadon. The thing about the Amalgadon is it's kind of big enough to contest all the dragons already, so it feels a little superfluous. But I guess it will let it kill the Razorgore now. Not that he can quite see Diana's board. Obviously, we have caster vision here.
Right. He doesn't hit the Nadina, and unfortunately, I think that's going to be a pretty easy win for Diana, despite that Amalgadon being kind of a house, to use a Shoism.
And with this win for Diana in this round, I believe it will be lethal damage, depending on... maybe not, actually. The Amalgadon... No, that's well over.
Yeah. That was an explosive first lobby. No Murlocs in the endgame there. It ended up being a mirror of dragons, even though Sho had an option to go for pirates very early on, didn't quite hit it, and that was very decisive from Sho there. But ultimately, Diana's double Caligos was too much scaling to get through.
Yeah. VK looking like they're taking out the first place in the lobby so far, but Team Liquid still had a pretty strong start. I believe WTY Bill and Sho placed 3rd and 2nd respectively. So in the standings so far, I believe Liquid's going to be a bit higher up.
Yeah, it is a bit worrisome for FCB, though we did point out at the beginning that we're much more used to seeing Zim and Blyzus and Swids just kill it in Constructed, but we don't necessarily know how much experience they have in Battlegrounds. You could also blame it on the pick of the hero. If Patchwork was the best that Zim was offered, sometimes you just can't really knock that, whereas Eudora and Kael'thas is definitely a bit more confidence to begin with, but they're going to have to pick it up for the second lobby, which will be coming up pretty soon because it is 2 lobbies a day for the same.
Yeah, and I believe over the course of the week before we get into finals, we will have 6 lobbies for each of the groups, so we'll have plenty more opportunities to see these players show us what they've got and see how they can battle it out for the standings.
Right. And so those particular lobby that we watched a while ago, I have to say that I'm surprised of the amount of mechs that we saw. I think it was 3 different people that were double Deflectabots plus eggs plus Bolvars, which is something that I don't necessarily see people sticking on for very long to on ladder.
Yeah, it tends to be more of a, like you said, top 4 comp if you can try to push it that far, because it gives you an earlier spike, and the spike isn't quite as large as what some of the other minion type comps can give you, but it gives you a bit of an edge to hopefully try and knock some people out before you get to the top 3, top 2 sort of finalists. So I wouldn't be surprised to see people going for mechs, especially when we see that the point distribution is weighted from 1st all the way down to 8th. So you still get some pretty decent points for finishing 4th or 3rd. Even 5th gets you some more points than obviously 6th, 7th, or 8th. So maybe we'll be seeing these players go for top 4 builds more often than first places, depending on how risky they need to play, how the other lobbies have been panning out, and so on.
Yeah, it's a great point you bring up, because I think prior to this, the global audience is most used to seeing competitive Battlegrounds from the invitational events, where the most recent one held, there were no points for 8th place and was very heavily weighted for going for 1st. So a lot of people, you would see them actively picking Flurgle, actively going for Murlocs, even though it's a very feast or famine comp, because that type of meta rewarded going for the riskier comps a lot more. And now it's a struggle to say that there's a competitive Battlegrounds meta to begin with when the game is still in beta, when there's hardly any private lobbies, but now we're thrown into a whole other region style of doing it. So it's going to be a big adjustment for everybody playing Battlegrounds as a team for the first time.
Definitely. Even seeing how the strategies are going to change from lobby to lobby based on what's excluded is going to be quite interesting. One of the, I think, more fun lobbies is when Murlocs are out, because then a lot of other archetypes can kind of pop up and give you breathing room. Generally, Murlocs, if they survive to late game, will end up being the top 1, top 2 sort of comp. So I hope we get to see at least a couple of Murloc-less lobbies and see what kind of reigns on top. But I mean, even in this lobby, we saw that Murlocs got knocked out quite a bit early, and Dragons ended up reigning supreme. So we'll see what happens.
I'm also particularly excited to see the Rafams and Tessas come out because we are in a team format. So despite there not being any direct communication allowed, sometimes if you're on Rafam and you know you're facing your teammates, sometimes you can just feed them a nice Murloc Tidehunter first in line and give them the token. Or if you're Tess and you see your opponents going for Murlocs, that's a very easy way to get Murlocs for yourself. But we are in the second lobby now. Zim on a much more powerful hero, Nosdarmu, and Blyzes with the Kael'thas. For Kimmy, it is a mystery because it's still a Finley, and over for Trunks, Eudora.
Pretty powerful lobbies, no surprise there. Picking what is probably the most consistent powerful heroes to try and get an edge. Yeah. Ooh, we see Flurgle available, which tells us... Oh, actually, Nosdarmu's available as well.
Yeah, I'd chicken out and take the Nosdarmu here every single time. It is so consistent. And I have to say that on the 5 gold turn, when you're around 2 stars, it's actually so crucial to make sure that you end up with 1 or 2 2-star minions and fight against your opponent, because I don't underestimate the amount of health that can be lost before you're even building a comp.
Yeah, definitely. Pirates being out this lobby, so we won't be seeing any salty looters this time around.
Nor gold grubbers, which is a very common character as well.
Yeah, especially for Eudora. So we know that Eudora will have at least 1 less high roll available.
Okay. Good pickup for Zim here. Nosdarmu is one of those heroes that allows you to, on the 7 gold turn, immediately level and then roll for a 3-star minion. There's not that many great ones in the pool, but if you can pick up Bronze Warden a turn earlier than everyone else, that can be huge as well, because that's one of the prime minions to buff.
WTY build considering going off curve and deciding if he wants to take this Dragon Spawn Lieutenant pair.
With Edwin, there's a small incentive also to go off curve and fit in the little buff, but I think he decides that it's not worth it in the end, wants to get better 2-star minions and find a nice Divine Shield for Edwin to start buffing.
Again, we see LPPF on Yogg going for a turn 2 token pickup and to sell hero power instead of leveling. It's something I've experimented with a bit myself, but haven't done so much recently. I've kind of been following the curve where you hero power on 1, level on 2, and then on turn 3 you get the hero power in with a buy. But it looks like these players are favoring the powerful start.
Yeah, the aggro curve with Yogg actually works out pretty well with the gold if you hit a token early on, because on the 7 gold turn, even if you leveled 1 turn later than everyone, you can still level for 5 gold and use the hero power to buy something, end up with a full board still, and maybe a little bit of less health lost there. For Diana, though, he's on Maiev, which is also one of the top-tier heroes right now, and something I recently learned also from Sixo and from Lee, one of my good friends and a top-rated America's BG player, is that hero power on 1 with Maiev is very valid as well.
WTY Bill against Sho, where Sho is playing Deathwing and holds the Rat Pack, knowing that it will do a lot of damage to his teammate. He takes some damage in return, but I think between the two of them, they would rather have Sho take 3 health than WTY Bill take 5 or 6 there.
Completely agreed. Edwin is a lot more vulnerable to losing in the early game before he can really buy a lot of minions in 1 turn and take advantage of the hero power. Whereas with Deathwing, as long as you hit the rat, you're kind of rolling and chilling for the first few turns. And I think you need to take the advantage from that early game power spike to roll into 5 or 6 tier and hit the Mama Bear for the Beast comp, which is what Deathwing tends to go for.
We see Trunks on Eudora getting a Houndmaster from the digs and then discovering a Security Rover. Not the best start in terms of what you can be offered, but with Gold Grubber being out, honestly, a Houndmaster as an 8/6 this early is still pretty good.
Yeah, and the Rover, might I add, because he was facing Deathwing, could easily farm Sho a little bit. This looks like it's going to be in favor of PF as long as he gets 1 good trade onto those more powerful minions. Finley going to be taking its first set of damage here. A bit too early to say we're going in terms of direction, but now people are going to be leveling up to Tavern 3.
Yep, and now we might be seeing some actual direction pop up. Generally, early on, you want to pick up the minions that are just good and powerful to help you kind of chug along until you see something powerful that will let you transition to some sort of late game build.
Zim picks up the pair there for the Sorolisk instead of rolling and then buying. And in my experience, picking up the Sorolisk is a little bit of a bait. I think the Death Rattle buff build is very, very slow because unlike Battle Cries, you get immediate benefit from buying and selling. With Death Rattle, the only benefit you get for your net 2 gold lost is +2 +K. So if anything, I expect Zim to just hold on to those temporarily, unless he gets a triple.
Yep. Early Sorolists, just holding them around so you get a little bit of a power spike early is still decent, I think, but like you said, it's hard to transition into a much later game comp, especially if you are looking for Goldrin, which is now a Tavern Tier 6 minion after the most recent patch, so it's even harder to make that comp work.
I do miss Goldrin and the Macaws and Baron. That was just the easiest comp to build, I think, in terms of it's not very flexible.
Yeah, definitely. And you have Macaw early on in a build where you can also just pick up Spawn Nazoth or Selfless Heroes and kind of get a little more powerful like that before you even find the Goldrin, which ends up being pretty strong. But now with Goldrin on 6, it's hard to transition to that because you need to Tavern Tier a little higher than you used to.
And Bill there got a very clutch trade, his Rat Pack actually trading up at the end there. And Rat Pack, if you buff it early enough, can deal so much damage that is uncalled for in the early game when you get the last, or get it to be the last minion in the trade. But Bill is gonna hit a nice triple here, gets another Death Rattle buff, and High Main looks like it fits in pretty well with the build he has currently.
Yep, he's got quite a bit of a beast build going on. Mechru, not normally the minion you see tripled because its upgraded value isn't that powerful, but just finding any triple is still pretty decent to get an upgrade on your board with the Discover option from the next Tavern Tier.
Yeah, on Tier 4, there's a lot of great tempo options, High Main and Egg being the prime ones that come to mind. Whereas when you discover leading into Tier 5, that's kind of signaling that you're ready to find a direction. But I think it's still early enough that if you just find good enough guys to minimize the damage you take while building up to Tier 5, it's completely fine here. For Kimmy, also a bit of beast going on here. There's a lot of people going for Sorolists this early.
Yeah, it seems like they missed it last round when beasts weren't available in the lobby and they're trying to make up for it. I mean, Macaw is very powerful.
Yeah. And I have to say, Maiev is one of the heroes that I think favors a Murloc build as well, because the pair gaming in hand allows you to time your triples very, very well. And for Murlocs, timing the triples to go into either Tier 5 or Tier 6 is absolutely key, whether it's looking for Bran, for Bagurgle, or for, of course, Megasaur.
Yep. Ooh. With the finished Servant buff going on Deathwing's Rat Pack at the end, and it looks like Diana's going to take a lot more damage than he would have liked.
Yep.
Meanwhile, Kimmy manages to get a clean trade. No one takes damage there.
Diana, who was the winner of the last lobby, is now struggling to get a good start with Maiev. But if you're on Murlocs really early, it kind of relies on saving health, because there's going to be a painful point guaranteed when you have to level to 5, and you do have to level to 5 with Murlocs to start finding the Primal Fins and Bagurgles very consistently.
Yeah, definitely. I noticed a little earlier when Diana was going through the early turns, he wasn't actually able to get too many pairs with his hero power just from what he was offered. Maybe that's one of the reasons why he's struggling right now, because he doesn't have the option to Tavern Tier up and turn in a triple.
Could very well be. For this Eudora, it's not very much direction I can see as well. He does pick up a crowd favorite pair, which there is a build that's a bit difficult to pull off, but if you can get golden crowd favorite and just some selfless heroes and Baron, it ends up being very similar to Wrathweaver builds. It's hard to say that that can be a direction this early on though. For Zim, he's very committed to beasts at the moment. He's picked up a Macaw, but not quite any Death Rattle that you want to necessarily get with Macaw. I think it's great to pair it with a guaranteed spawn of Nazoth in the early game, but with Rat Pack at the very least can additionally buff his hyenas.
The reason why the Macaw beast build has fallen off to some extent is because, like we mentioned, Goldrin being on 6 is incredibly, it doesn't sound like that much, but it's a lot later than being on 5, just because of the strength of the board you can make by that point. And we can see Zim's board right now, even though he does have quite a bit of a beast set up. it's difficult to scale well because you don't have any cards that kind of synergize until you get the Goldren Baron stuff going on. Looks like he will be fine against Diana's Murlocs, though. Yeah,
barely pulls together a tie and could give him some time to look for a triple. If he hits triple on the Sorolisk and the Hyena, that could help Zim give the signal to level to 5 so he can try and pull Mama Bear.
Now we see Trunks on Eudora, getting the second dig. Gets Replicating Menace. Yeah, it's not bad. He has to consider now.
He can latch it onto the Deflecto immediately or onto a different mech that he wants to keep. The Security Rover, if there's no space on board, actually doesn't end up summoning anything, so that's also a decent target for the Menace.
None of these options help too much. There's not a lot of dragons that Trunks has available, not a lot of beasts either. He might be going for an Imp Mama just for some tempo.
Yeah, looks like it. It's quite awkward for Trunks.
Diana found a Bran, got some Murlocs in hand.
Ooh.
Big power turn here. I think he just Caventured to 4 the turn before. And
I think he took a lot of damage in the early game, but this could be very well the turning point now. He has across the board very well statted Murlocs, freezes another Seer, and it looks like he has bought himself the time to get to tier 5. So this could be a Murloc come from behind win from Diana, as long as he doesn't get blown out in the mid game. But when Pirates are banned, there's a lot less chance of that happening, because I find that Pirates is one of those builds where if you're not prepared, you're saying, okay, I'm going to take a loss this turn while I level, and then suddenly your opponent just has a bunch of Hoggers already on board. They can deal so much additional damage, especially with Nat Pago.
Yeah, with the buffs from Ripsnarl captains or an early Admiral Eliza, you'll end up walking the plank real quick. Sorry.
It's a good pun, don't worry. Okay, well, the superior Murlocs in this case is the Maiev. Hitting the Bran Cold Lights here there was absolutely huge for Diana. I find it hard to believe Diana can be stopped in the mid game for now, especially since he's going to pick up another full board buff. But we are going on to Bill's board at the moment. With this Edwin Van Cleef, he's still not really hit anything that he wants to keep hero power buffing.
Yeah, the Rat Pack early on, like you said, is really good to get you started, but later on it ends up falling off because it's not as a powerful unit. A bunch of 1/1s that after as a death rattle are much less useful now than they were 5 turns ago. Nice to note that everyone in the lobby is still alive, even though some people are taking quite a bit more damage.
Bill has no pairs at the moment, but if I had to guess, ideally what he would want for tier 5 is Baron, with both the N'Zoth and the Kaboom bot on board. He can transition to selling off some of the beasts there and try to get a lot of bombs going off, but it does really rely on him, I think, finding a triple. So he's just going to roll a bit here and look for something good to pair, even if it's an Argus.
Yeah, he does find an Argus pair. With only one pair, he does need to find some way to kind of improve. He has 35 health though, so he does have some time. I don't think we've seen many Pirates right now. They're not in the lobby. So I don't think he'll be taking too much damage from anyone, even if he is losing the fights. Looks like Zim also found a triple.
Yeah, and he does get his Baron. Not necessarily the greatest with Rat Packs, but with the Ghast Coiler, that can also pull out additional damage where nobody's necessarily expecting it. He's facing off against the bottom player in the lobby, so that's a chance to actually knock someone out if he commits the Baron plus Ghast Coiler this early on.
He's a little low himself, and his board is congested with the 2 Rat Packs, so it's possible that if the Ghast Coiler gets sniped before a bunch of other minions die off, that the full death rattle won't happen.
Yeah, it's very awkward. There's a lot of snipeable targets here, Ghast Coiler, Pack Leader, and Baron. If any of those die at the inappropriate times, that can significantly weaken Zim's board. But for now... Oh, Baron.
Yeah, but there is enough... If Ghast Coiler doesn't get sniped right now, which it does not... Oh my god, that Murloc hitting the large Hyena at the end was not good for Zim.
That was very painful. Now Zim has to rely on some pretty good death rattles. I've seen more than a couple boats come off of these, but that will be good enough for
looks
Zim.
Like Zim gets it. Yeah, and with the High Main surviving at the end, it looks like PF will be knocked out.
And that's going to be pretty painful because LP didn't quite have as good a performance as VK in the first lobby as well. Moving over to Kimmy now, though, he's hit the golden spawn of N'Zoth and has a Macaw, but there are a couple of death rattles here that interfere with the Macaw guaranteed hitting the spawn of N'Zoth. So the ordering is not the most intuitive thing here.
Kimmy is also on 6, so he can find Goldrins and perhaps switch off of these other Death Rattle beasts just to guarantee the buff from the Goldrin coming in with a Baron Riven there. Meanwhile, oh my goodness, Diana with the brand discovered a Megasaur after a triple and found both Divine Shield and Poisonous, which is exactly what you want as the Murloc build. This is what makes it so powerful late game.
If you hit that trifecta of finding the Megasaur into finding the 2 ideal adapts, there's very little that can be done to defeat Murlocs from this point. I would say Murloc mirrors are the only way to beat this, aside from some very tricky dragon ordering if you have big dragons plus Nadina plus unstable ghoul and everything goes right. But Diana's looking unstoppable here. I wouldn't be surprised to see him take back-to-back first places in the lobbies.
Yeah. We see Kimmy did find a Goldrin on 6. Had to sell a couple units to be able to find it. I believe he just found a triple with his Sorless, which allowed him to discover the Goldrin. And he's freezing for Macaw for next turn.
He had to sell off his first Macaw to keep the rolling going, but that's always a bit painful to do. But since he wasn't sure he was going to commit to just the Spawn of N'Zoth and Goldrin, he did sell it off there. And he's going to rebuy it and figure out a pretty more straightforward, old school beasts type.
Kimmy's round here is looking close. Diane is looking a little less close than that with the Murlocs. Might not be able to deliver lethal damage, though.
Yeah. The Unstable Ghouls did quite a lot of work for cleaning up Divine Shields and those last little bits of health on the Murloc. So the Nozdormu, who is Zim, I believe, lives to see another day, but I think Diana is completely chilling now. I don't think anybody is at risk of out-Murlocking him at the moment, or even making a partial transition.
Amalgadon picked up by Kimmy.
Nice.
Oof, Death Rattle I don't think is what he wanted there.
Yep. The worst one because it doesn't guarantee that the Macaw will trigger Goldrin, which is, I'm sure, where Kimmy wants to end up at the end of this. Because the Gas Coiler is still a good tempo option for him, and the Spawn of N'Zoth, he won't necessarily go for Macaw right now until he hits triples, for example. Over on Blyze's side, he has also put together a pretty threatening Murloc comp. Not the Divine Shield across everything, but he has hit Poisonous, which is going to be powerful to finish off any non-Divine Shielded comps.
Yep. He's looking, I believe, now just to dodge Diana. He may not know that there's Divine Shield Poisonous Murlocs, but that would be a pretty strong counter without him having any way to protect his Poisonous Murlocs and the Myexna.
Last we saw of Deathwing was a beast comp, I believe, so that's also not necessarily going to be a win for the Murlocs if the health are too low, because a lot of tokens, despite there being poisonous on the Murloc, can get there.
Kimmy might be able to survive quite a bit in this lobby with some possible Gas Coiler boat shenanigans and Baron. You can actually end up getting enough stats to be able to contest some of the Murloc builds before they get too far ahead with health. Right now the Divine Shield Poisonous is very strong, but against heavy Death Rattle builds where lots of stuff is spawning, especially with a Baron on the board that doesn't get sniped, it can go the Death Rattle player's way.
And although there is Shields and spawns for Blyzes manages to save him for one spot here, but the Kale... Sorry, for the Deathwing, but Blyze is not completely out yet. He has some time to hit Megasaur of his own, find those Divine Shields, but he's still going to be outscaled by Diana should they face off at the very top.
It's
like a lot of damage on this Eudora.
Yeah. I believe these came from Gas Coiler, right? The Void Lord and the Sneed Shredder. Very unfortunate pops. That's a lot of damage. Still not enough to knock out Trunks, but it's definitely a big hit.
And for Zim now, he has hit a Baron of his own, has been digging for Goldrin, still has not been able to find it quite yet though.
Without Macaw, he can consider picking up the Amalgadon. He doesn't mind if the Death Rattle pops up, and he might also be considering the Myexna based on what else is in the lobby.
At this point, the pack leader looks to have outlived its use. So I'm definitely looking at picking up either one of those two that you suggested.
The good thing about rolling...
Probably leaning towards Mayaxa.
No, I think, yeah, actually, as Zim, with the amount of health he has available, I don't think he's too concerned about dealing with the Murloc players. I think he just wants to focus on surviving the next couple rounds and eking out as high of a rank as possible before he gets knocked out. I don't think he'll be able to take out the Murlocs, even with an unstable Ghoul. I believe with the amount of turns that they've had with Bran on the board, they'll just have too much health to be able to be dealt with.
I would have to agree. Bill here on another Divine Shield comp, also looking to just survive for as long as possible. It's funny that I say that because he is in first place in terms of health, but that's because he's gone for a very mid-game oriented build, which tends to do well while people are still deciding on what their comp will be. But the problem with the Divine Shield build is that it caps out around here at Tavern 4. There's not much to be done to improve it. Even if he hits some triples, he wasn't looking to necessarily even triple the Bolvar because more Divine Shield on board. This is actually a quantity beats quality type.
Yep. One of the ways to beat a sort of early game Murlocs as well is the Divine Shield comp until they scale their health out. The Divine Shield's letting you trade over Murloc, even if they have poisonous, is very powerful. I don't think that's going to be the case in this game unless WTY Bill faces against X-Plies, who didn't have Divine Shields on his Murlocs last time we checked. But if he does run into Diana, I think it'll it'll be lights out.
It's also looking like lights out for Zim here. I don't think even with the Rat Pack buffs from Pack Leader that there will quite be enough attack to actually beat all the health on the Dragons and the Bolvars. And so that's also going to be a pretty unfortunate finish for Zim here. Diana very easily edging his way to the top here.
Kimmy holding on to dear life with 1 health, still alive. Trunks here we see is facing the Ghost, so he has a bit of breathing room before the next round. Might be able to get out a top 4 or 3 now if someone else gets knocked out this round.
I have to say that's a pretty good dig for the build he's been going for. Another Divine Shield Dragon. Hits Caligos if he wants to scale somehow with the dragons that he already has. He can go for a partial scale and still keep some of the mechs, but at this point it's not looking very hopeful for Trunks. He is facing a Ghost though, so that could give him some time.
Yep. Kangors is a way to kind of try to eke out some extra percentages if you want to try to roll the dice and get more Deflectobot resets, but with just a Creator Rover being around, I don't think it's going to be as impactful as perhaps an Amalgadon, especially if he's able to get Poisonous on it. He may also be looking to switch. He does have 2 turns. Maybe if he gets, rolls into a Bran and hits a Megastore on some triple, he's able to swap to Murlocs.
Yeah, with his pick of the Murazon there and holding onto this Primal Fin for so long, I think Trunks is making that decision where his current comp can beat the Ghost. He doesn't need to make it any stronger. And so he would rather focus on putting together the tools to beat some of the Murlocs later on, or at least survive against the ones who aren't Murlocs. And over on Kimmy's side, he has managed to hit the Golden Macaw, looking like the very pre-nerf Death Rattle build, which was favored way more than the Mama Bear build because of how consistent it could get the beast up to, 30 stats or higher.
Yeah. Sho saw what he was up against and started nodding his head, understanding that this is probably where he's going to step out this lobby.
Yeah, with the trade of that Bolvar, just a little bit of health surviving on his Divine Shield minion makes it so that Sho is going to get knocked out for now here. VK Kimmy looking very strong, but the second he lines up into Merle, very worried for him.
Yep, W2I Bill hanging on with 1 health, while his teammate Sho does fall in 5th place. Still pretty close. A lot of people low health. Diana obviously in the lead with the Murlocs that he has and the 16 health compared to the 6, 1, and 1 of the other 3 people in the lobby.
At this point for Trunks, you said a while ago that he's looking for Bran to make a partial or full transition, but it's not looking like he's going to have the time. For Trunks, though, I have to say, job well done for making it this far and recognizing that this is the type of lobby where there's going to be a few people that will pull very, very far ahead, and if you didn't get the Murloc start as early as them, there's just nothing you can do to beat, so might as well focus on beating the rest of the field, and I think Trunks has accomplished that admirably. For now, though, not going to be very much he can do against Murlocs. He is going to face off against the Beast comp first, though, and I would think there's not much he can do if they all get 20, 30 health also.
Normally you don't want to triple deflector bots because having the two separated divine shields ends up being very powerful, but I think Trunks is looking here for exactly that Megasaur if he wants to switch the Murlocs like we've been talking about. He's made top 4 now. I believe he thinks that to get any farther in this lobby he does need to make some sort of transition at some point, and he's trying to figure out how to do that now. He finds a Brand. He's running a little bit out of time, but he should have enough time to squeeze in this Megasaur on the 3 Murlocs he has available. Doesn't find Poisonous on the first hit. He gets it on the second. Okay.
Yeah.
Now he's against W2Y Bill. Wait, hold on. No, he's against who's your Finley?
The Beasts. And
the
Poison
Beasts,
gives him a lot more game against the Beast here, but this Hydra and the fact that there are 2 taunts here could mean that it snipes 2 high priority minions at once. One did have Divine Shield though.
I think Trunks needed that to hit the
non-poison taunt. Yeah.
It might still be enough actually. With Trunks' transition and getting the Poisonous, I think he's actually able to take at least 3rd place, maybe 2nd place here, because of the fact that he realized he was up against Beast and needed a few more Poisonous. And this way he has a chance against Diana. It might not be very high because Diana has a full board of Divine Shield Poisonous Murlocs, but he's definitely secured himself top 2 in this lobby.
Yeah, it is non-zero if he finds immediately another Megasaur and can hit Divine Shield on the non-Divine Shield minions with poison and also a lot of plants. We see here that Diana has not hit the Megasaur for Death Rattle yet, which is kind of the final one you need for the Murloc Mirror so that you can spawn plants to pop the Divine Shields on the other side.
Yep. Diana actually a little bit shy of getting triple Brand as well. Generally a bit of a luxury, but I believe with how far ahead he was this game, he thought he might be able to hold on to another Brand.
But no Megasaur available for Trunks, and not enough rolls as well. I think that's going to spell his end here. But that was very admirably fought by Trunks there. Going for mechs for the majority of the game, and then transitioning to just enough Murlocs to beat Beasts and outlast the other Murloc in the lobby, I think was very good recognition. Yeah,
definitely. Like you said earlier, it's pretty impossible to win every single lobby, so if you're able to find an opportunity to just sneak up a couple of ranks here at the end to finish a bit higher is definitely going to help quite a lot, especially in these team standings when you're trying to match with your teammate and get a score together.
And Diana with the Maiev plays early on. I think I recall you saying that he didn't hit very many pairs, and that's often a way to spell doom if you commit to Murlocs too early and don't actually hit the triples. But I think right in the nick of time, Diana found the Brand, he found the complete board buffs, and from there, I don't think he's lost a single combat.
Yep, he's been coasting. One thing that Trunks could have done here is perhaps look for an Unstable Ghoul. I'm not sure if he's faced Diana in a while, because if he has, I think he might have died earlier, so he might not know that Diana has Divine Shields. An Unstable Ghoul still might not have won him the game here, but it might have helped a bit against all the Divine Shields, even though he himself has Divine Shields.
Gotten to the point, though, where even if you lose by a little bit at 6 health, that is going to be lethal damage, because Diana has leveled to a high enough point by now. And that's going to be 2 lobbies that VK Diana finishes first in. That's an absolute beast right there.
18 points just from Diana alone for VK is an incredible start. We still have quite a few lobbies to go over the next six days or so, but this is an incredibly powerful start from VK.
Especially since I know him primarily as a constructed player, and to see him be put in the Battlegrounds roster and kill it there as well is doubly impressive. So for anybody who's just tuning in now, the Battlegrounds portion will be played as the first 2 rounds of every day for the upcoming week. So we have 6 more days of Battlegrounds action. Tomorrow we're going to be seeing from Group B, and the day after you're going to be seeing from the same guys we just watched again. But that is it for the Battlegrounds portion of the day.
Yep. A couple of things to note. In that second lobby, Team Liquid with Stro and W2Y Bill still performed pretty well after their second and third finish in the first lobby. I think they finished a bit lower this time. FCB also had a bit of a poor showing in the past 2 rounds, but I think it's kind of hard to say just from 2 rounds how their experience kind of lines up against other players. So looking forward to see what they bring back to the table in a couple of days as well.
It is worth noting, though, that we did not see Swids at all for both of those lobbies, so it seems like he's assigned to completely just constructed, and he'll have to, I guess, carry the weight a little bit more there, as we also could likely see Zim and Blazes play constructed later on today and throughout the week. And so based on what we've seen, I think I can pretty confidently say VK is on the top here, followed by Liquid, followed by LP, and with FCB at the bottom, and that's the story A. But for Group B, there's a lot of big names on those teams that you could be hearing from. T1 in particular and G2 are the international teams, and with players like Sixo and RDU who have been grinding Battlegrounds day in and day out, I think it's going to be very strong competition.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to watching that tomorrow. It's going to be pretty exciting, honestly. And I think so far I've been pretty happy with what we've been seeing from these lobbies. It's generally more how should I put this? It's a lot easier to watch from a single player perspective when someone's streaming, but there's so much action going on in a player lobby when you get to bounce around and see what everyone's doing. It's a lot more interesting having the full view, the caster view, instead of just the first person perspective.
Yeah, I think even how to present Battlegrounds as an esport is still an evolving science, but so far it's been a complete blast. Tomorrow, I'm particularly looking forward to hearing from Nightwalk, who is praised as probably the best Battlegrounds player in China, or at least one of the most popular, and also see him face off against the best that Europe has to offer in RDU and Sixo. For Team Liquid, though, have to say, I didn't quite expect them to not get first, because across our caster predictions, we thought that they would be some of the best, at least in constructed.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they've still been performing pretty well. And like I said, that we have 6 lobbies, I think, for each of the groups before we actually move on to the finals for Battlegrounds anyways. So there's still a lot of time and a lot of lobbies to be able to figure out who's going to end up on top. I'm curious to see how tomorrow's standings kind of line up with what we've had today, if there's going to be a bit more close proximity between the players, if all the points added up are going to be a lot more close, or if there's going to be disparity and we have some teams clearly pulling far ahead, like we've seen today with Team Liquid and VK.
Yeah, as far as the previous Battlegrounds tournament held in China, GTC, went, I think there did end up being a very huge disparity between first and second place. I think Nightwalk had 200 points plus earned for his team, whereas the next highest player had 180. So Nightwalk definitely seemed like the MVP there, but as early as now, VK Diana is looking like a front runner to just be the MVP for Battlegrounds, no matter what team we're looking at. But that is going to be the end of Battlegrounds for today, and we're going to move on to our constructed portion. And for anyone joining us right now, all of the teams have players assigned to Battlegrounds or constructed, or both if you're FCB. And we are going to be seeing how this particular new format is going to play out. All 10 classes involved, with a complex ban phase leading to ultimately 6 decks available for a last hero standing best of 5. What do you think would be the strategy that comes to mind for playing that, Hacker?
There's a couple different ways you can take it. The first thing you need to look at is kind of what are the strong classes, because those are most likely going to be banned, regardless of the archetype. If for example, Control Demon Hunter and Aggro Demon Hunter are both very viable, so you probably just want to knock out all the strong classes, and then based on what's left, you can try to tailor all of your decks to be favored against the general archetypes you'll be able to see in the remaining 6 decks. Now, in last year's standing, it's still a bit more complicated, because you still need a variety of archetypes to be able to knock out any one deck that happens to power through some of your decks. It's going to be interesting. I think from the deck list we've seen earlier, and which will be coming up shortly in the constructed portion, it's going to be interesting to see which of the strategies kind of take precedence, because I've seen a lot of different archetypes in some of the classes, whereas for other classes like Shaman and Paladin, I think we've seen almost a consensus on what kind of decks people are bringing. For example, Murloc Paladin was very popular across all the submitted deck lists.
Yeah, if we're going to take a leaf out of the book of MT APAC, though, there was actually one of the top players from China had Shaman in his lineup, which is a deck that, honestly, every time we see it on stream, it seems lackluster, but it puts in the work somehow in the Swiss portion and definitely got him all the way to top 8. So I wonder if the Chinese players have been putting a little bit more time into how to build these less popular archetypes, these less popular classes, and they could pull out an ace in the hole in these more unusual formats. And it's also worth noting that the 6 remaining decks, not all of them will actually be picked towards the end of this, because you have a pool of 6 after the bans are used to actually choose which one you're going to be queuing out. So there's a whole layer of mind games involved, and there's also a very more difficult environment to go for any targeting strategies.
Yeah, definitely. It's very dangerous to target a very specific deck or two, because your opponent, if they catch on to this, they would just not play that deck, and then all of your strategies are kind of lacking a little bit. And there's definitely an edge to be gained in this format, because if you can find, like you said, an ace in the hole in one of these more uncommon classes that are played, that we don't see played as often in some of the different formats we've seen, and that can catch your opponent off guard, maybe you could just able to sneak a win with something like Shaman, like you said, which still performs pretty well even in the other formats we've been seeing. So perhaps some of the other well-known classes, maybe Paladin, for example, it can become more of a powerhouse in this format.
Yeah, Shaman in particular can prey on some popular decks like Druid, and we were hearing from our resident CN expert Tony that Druid is actually one of the most popular classes in the Chinese scene. I think this was before the nerf to Fungal Fortune, so that may have changed, but I was hearing that in that previous meta, it would sometimes draw bans even before Warrior, which over in the Grandmasters ecosystem is probably unheard of.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I think in some matches we still saw the odd Druid ban in Grandmasters, but it was still kind of uncommon. Banning Warrior was by far the most popular strategy, at least from our perspective. It'll be interesting to see how the Druids are going to perform, and probably going to be banned, but I don't know. It's we didn't actually prepare the 10 deck format ourselves, so we'll see what strategies they ended up going for.
Yeah. So off the top of your head, you mentioned that Demon Hunter was going to be seeing universal bans, right? If you're given 4 classes to ban, it has to be one that's up there. What would you most likely expect for the other 3?
Warrior's probably going to be very up there as well. I would say Druid, based on what we've heard about the Chinese scene and Druid being very popular. And even among the Grandmasters, even though Druid wasn't the primary ban, this is a 4-ban format. So you do have a little bit more leeway. You don't have to ban, I mean, you can't only ban Demon Hunter, you have to ban something else. So I believe Demon Hunter, Warrior, Druid, and then a 4th could be perhaps Hunter. Highlander Hunter has been very popular lately after the most recent wave of nerfs, just having a pretty good spread across the board. So if you want to try to knock out just the 4 standalone power level classes, I think those are the 4 I would look at.
I would also agree that for the vanilla types of bans, but of course, after the first ban is actually learned by the opposing team, then you get to reconvene with your team and figure out which are the next 2. So it's a first ban and then discuss, come back, ban the next 2 classes, discuss, come back, and then ban that 4th one. So there's a lot of mind games that can be going on between each and every single phase here, but we're going to hear a little bit more about that after this break. Thank you so much for joining us, Hacker. We're going to get into construction